everyone. I'm Tadeo Urinde. I'm the founder of Campuswire. And I'm going to give you guys pretty much a quick introduction to what we do, how we imagine the problem space we're working in, and give you a little bit of a taste of what's around the corner. Like everybody else that you will literally meet at this conference, I want to have a big dent in education, so we'll just jump right in. And so the problem today is essentially that if you're a professor at one of most universities in the country today, and actually globally, you have an absolute nightmare trying to manage class Q&A announcements and discussions. Professors actually report spending more than 18 hours a week just emailing students. Gen Z students, they want instant feedback. They didn't grow up like I did saying, hey mom, can you get off the phone, I'm trying to use the internet. You know, they're used to instant messaging, everything being immediate. And then engagement, it's a word I'm sure you've heard a million times at this conference already that is kind of amorphous and doesn't really mean anything. It's impossible to measure at the moment, and this isn't the way it has to be. Most technologies, many technologies allow us to be able to measure engagement and make these things very empirical, but they're not being used in the classroom. It's extremely hard to measure what's actually happening in a course at any given moment. And so if you're a professor today at Berkeley, for example, where the largest class has more than 2,000 students, it's 2,200 students, the night before a big assignment's due, you'll get up to 2,000 individual emails asking the exact same questions. And then you'll respond to one and then copy paste it and then respond to another, and eventually you'll email the whole class thread, and then students will get inundated with emails that maybe weren't relevant to them, and so they'll stop checking their email, and there's this very negative cycle because no one really wants to use the LMS, and so email has to be default mode, which is not the right tool for managing class communication. And so for students, the problem is you're paying a lot for tuition, but it feels like you're getting increasingly less access to instructors and TAs, the people you're paid, who are paid to teach you. And this lack of support, or perceived lack of support, leads to a lack of engagement, and students, you ask any professor to compare the attendance at lecture 5 to lecture 1, and they'll tell you students drop off, maybe get 50% halfway through the semester. And then, of course, if students have a harder time getting access to legitimate help, then they find other ways to supplement. And so we built Campuswire, which is a really modern, easy-to-use communication platform that simplifies and streamlines class Q&A announcements and discussions. And so for professors, it's really efficient. I'll give you a bit more on that why. And for students, it has lots of features that enable students to be, it's very inclusive. So students have things like anonymity, where they can ask questions. Our research found that 50% of students were never going to raise their hand in class. They didn't want to be that idiot who asked a dumb question in class. And so giving them the ability to communicate with some degree of anonymity, which of course the professors can control, makes the classroom much more engaging and inclusive. And so the first efficiency gain comes because if you're a class that's using Campuswire, you'll come into class, the professor, on the first day, I'm Professor so-and-so, don't email me, all class communication goes on Campuswire. And you add all of your students to the class. And then a student, if they have a question, they'll post it on Campuswire. Almost all of the time, multiple students will have the same question, so you answer it once, and everyone can see that it was answered. And so instead of monotonously copying and pasting answers, you can do that once. There's DMs, so if students have private matters, they can message you privately. But the second efficiency gain, and this is the real kicker, comes from when students actually join in and start answering each other's questions. And so we've noticed that in pretty much every class, there's this top 5 to 15% of students, for whatever reason, they're far more proficient with material than everyone else. Maybe they had a really strong instructor in a prerequisite course, or maybe they're taking the class for the easy A. But basically what Campuswire does is turn them into unpaid TAs and get them to join in with the Q&A. So what they'll do, how it works is they'll start off the class, everyone starts on the same level, but then the more of their peers' questions they answer and the more upvotes they get, they'll actually level up to Bald Eagle. And it's cheesy, but you would be surprised how this incentive gets students really excited. And so students can actually upvote each other's answers to their questions. So even when professors or TAs aren't around, they can sort of crowdsource that credibility and know who knows what they're talking about. And of course, professors can come by and endorse the right answer. So instead of a professor trying to answer 2,000 kids' questions, you have about 200 kids, along with the professor and teaching staff, doing the Q&A, which makes learning a lot more scalable. And all these virtuous cycles get ignited. So instead of classes being, the larger a class being, that being a negative thing, you actually have that inverted, where the more students you have in a class, the smaller the average question response time will be. And that's actually the metric, that's the golden metric for us. The faster students can get their questions answered, all the sort of good metrics go up. And students love it. We get these kinds of tweets all the time. It's great for students to actually have this sense of community, knowing that other people are online with them, going through the same homework at the same time. And I mean, that's literally what's happening. All the students in the class, they all work on the homework assignments at the exact same time, like the night before it's due. But they'll be like in their dorm rooms, or some people in the library, but there's just literally no way at the moment for them all to tap in to that collective knowledge that they all have. And so Campuswire adds that community to the learning process. But this is just the first inning. One thing we noticed, and we've been live at our first schools, UCLA, for 5 quarters on the quarterly system, was that the fundamentals of Newtonian physics or biology 101 or intro to psych don't change. And so students are going to have pretty much the exact same questions as prior students when they're learning something, especially if they're learning from the same instructor or using the same course materials. And so we can actually predict in that first UCLA class 42% of the questions that students will ask in any subsequent term. And it's obvious, once you have that question bank, it's relatively straightforward to add a machine learning algorithm to automate some of the Q&A. Now, 11% of the questions students ask in courses aren't related to actual learning. They're things like, I didn't do well in the final exam, can I get some more extra credit? Or what's the policy around late homework? These sorts of questions are already answered in the syllabus. Professors and TAs shouldn't have to spend any time answering them. Campuswire learns as you use it and can automate the answering of those sorts of questions. But over time, the opportunity, once you've aggregated all of this data, is to really build AI-assisted teaching assistants, where students in the future will be able to have instant and unlimited access to experts, in quotes, with regards to whatever they're learning. And so that's what we're building. We're building the data set. We give Campuswire the communication piece away for free, and then professors and students contribute to this really interesting and really powerful data set that we think is, well, it's going to, if we can structure it correctly, not only will you be able to sort of answer questions in one class, but again, Physics 101 at UCLA is the same essentially as Physics 101 elsewhere, so you'll be able to pretty much teach students entirely automated. So that's Campuswire. We'll be around if anyone has any questions. Thank you.